budget, I'll just step back and say, 3 years ago when I first started on the finance committee, typically what would happen is each department head would come forward with 7 stacks of paper, one for each committee member.
Right.
And so we got this huge stack of paper, and it was all spreadsheets. These spreadsheets that now we have electronically, we had on paper previously. We never had a summary sheet to go with it to say what were the department's goals, what were the impacts of the budget guidance on what you're doing. So now we have that. That's been a big improvement this year. But I think always the struggle, even previously, was understanding what all the stacks of paper meant, what the columns meant. So I know that finance staff, they know what it means. They can walk us through what some of those spreadsheets mean. So that's one topic. Another topic I'm hearing is navigating through our iPad folders to find, so say the sheriff's coming in and he's reading off of his narrative. Well, we would have to go to one folder for that. But I see right here, he's got spreadsheets in front of him. Now, do these spreadsheets match what we have on our iPads? That has been a problem with some of these this morning. So that's kind of one theme I'm hearing, is that we're not always seeing what the department head is seeing. Also, sometimes even some simple things like the formatting. I just heard the discussion. I was eavesdropping on that one with Supervisor Carroll and Barb Scott. Sometimes the figuring out how to rotate pages so we can read them, so we're not going like this, which automatically then rotates it again on our iPads. That would be something that would help. And I heard Clerk Kalish earlier say, we almost need like an A, B, C, D, E. These are the things we need from department heads in this order. So I think I'm hearing that a lot of these questions and conversation is good, because then I think staff can hear what we're saying and how we're reacting to things, and then that can lead to more improvements in the future. So, yeah, Mr. Langer, go ahead.
Current plan, as I see going forward into next year, and talk about this in the future budget as we build it.
Can you speak up just a little? So.
As we build the budget for next year, I visualize in our initial committee folder, that first folder, we'll take all these documents out of the actual finance and personnel committee folder, and we actually build like a budget folder. And we build a 2022 budget folder, and then we have it broken down by departments, and maybe underneath the preliminary budgets, and then underneath there is each department's role. We can place in the summaries, we can place in the drop down all the general ledgers. It might also give us an opportunity to put the expenditure documents with the revenue documents as possible and try to format it that way. We'll also have maybe some additional guidance by then too, of allowing or getting to the point where departments can kind of make sure that they're reviewing those as well, to make sure what's going to be shown to you folks, they have access to see as well. So I've got notes on it. If additional things come up, by all means, please bring those concerns up so we can improve.
Okay, does anyone else on the committee want to say anything after? That's just my summary. I'm just trying to take in what you all are saying and try to spit it back out.
I'd just like to
comment or question, Mr. Chair, but
Supervisor Luck, she was just starting to speak, and then you can go.
I'm sorry, Ms. Luck.
No problem, Don. I just want to say that this is amazing, and we're not complaining. It's a little hard to follow, but it's still a huge improvement over past. So.
It's okay if you are complaining. That's part of your job. So, but,
we recognize how much work this has been for you both and for all the department heads. So it's hugely helpful.
And part of it too is that, just on the front end too, is some expectation management, is that our system is a little bit clumpy and trying to always connect the dots on this ties into this and ties into this report. Those slices of the pie kind of get cut in different spots sometimes. So just on the forefront too, to have some expectation management of it. It might not always be as easy as understanding on a form that we're looking at. Well, where's that coming from? Well, I don't know if we can always draw the lines to that. It's a big system. It's a very big system. Thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Mr. Seep, go ahead.
Yes, perhaps one of the issues, and I agree with Melissa. It's a terrific improvement, and it gives us a a very good, it takes a little more study, but it gives us eventually a very good bird's eye view of the countywide budget. I think computer programs, the formats resulting from them sometimes throw us off a bit because there are many different kinds of budget formats that are spun out of various programs. Many of us are used to a conventional P&L and operating statement, traditional financial statement. And we do see that in a couple of our, especially in our Pine Valley statement. But it's difficult to mesh all of these, and even some of the departments, like the sheriff's department, has a slightly different way of accounting. I think part of it is the overall computer matrix program that we have. I commend Mr. Langrick and our MLIS staff for bringing all this clumsy stuff together. And it is at times clumsy, shuffling 4 or 5 sheets and not understanding what these codes mean, and not being sure what account is which because of the codes. Derek had a very, very illustrative line item approach to explaining his budget. I'm used to that kind of thing more than I am some of the formats we have now. But I think we all need a tutorial from our finance staff to educate the board and walk them through a budget and how to read it. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and that takes us to 10:15, so we want to get Sheriff Porter going here, so if you want to take the first section to just present, you can, and we're happy to hold our questions until you're done presenting, so take it away, it's all yours.
So I guess I'm not sure with what I shared with Clint and Derek and Josh. I presented 2 budget options. Option 1 was my attempt at following budget guidance. It was a 0.7% levy increase, which amounts to $22,934. To accomplish that, I made some, and what I see as significant staff reductions. I cut equipment, but I also cut staff. And so what that amounts to is 1 full-time patrol deputy and 1 full-time jailer. Option 2 that I gave was a 5% levy increase for $166,028. One important note I want to make with option 1 is I didn't factor in increased overtime. I should have, but I didn't, and that could easily exceed $100,000. So that greatly closes that gap between the 2 options. I guess I'll open up for questions. I have more I can talk on, but I'll open up for questions just kind of with that intro.
Okay, anyone have questions?
I do.
Yeah.
Sorry. So we're down a deputy this year, which is sort of playing out.
A little louder, Melissa.
Down a deputy this year, someone is out on comp, and so that sort of has played out the scenario of having 1 less deputy. What has been the overtime impacts? Do we know or how we're doing on overtime so far this year?
So we're over now. We just went over in July. I believe July was
Over the budgeted amount,
over the budgeted amount.
which
and
was
we're
20,000.
20,000. The jail, I think we are just under right now budget, but we're on track to go over. And so, yeah, you're accurate in saying we're kind of living that right now. But I guess on the flip side of that also is that, so right now we're down that person. Actually, we're not. We just got him back. So good news, we just got him back. But the thing is we don't go a very long period of time without being in that situation where we're down somebody because of an injury. So if you take us down to what would essentially be a 6-person per 24-hour period department. Anything below that, we're constantly covering overtime. So we would be permanently setting ourselves up for that situation.
That was what my point was.
Yeah, yeah, and so any injuries are gonna be guaranteed overtime every day. From there on, sick leave is gonna be guaranteed overtime. And now we do try, here and there to fill those positions with salary staff. You know, fill those gaps and try and reduce overtime, but it's not always an effective use of those people either to help cover, you know, patrol shifts.
So can I keep going? So the other question I had for Sheriff Porter while we were speaking on this topic was, what if you cut a deputy during the day and had your admin staff cover? Can you explain to the rest of the committee what the detrimental impacts of that kind of coverage would be?
So we do that from time to time. Basically what happens is the admin's work log just continues and doesn't get addressed. And then, you know, we reduce the overtime, but the backlog then creates a backlog for admin staff of stuff to do.
Can you tell me how that would work? But when you talk admin staff, who are you talking about?
I'm mostly
Yourself?
talking about the lieutenant, but I was coming in, you know, at nights here and there and covering patrol shifts as chief deputy as well. But I'm mostly talking about my lieutenant filling in shifts. But that was our reality for the last few months was, you know, I had picked up a few night shifts, you know, 4 or 5 hours in the night to help reduce overtime and just cover the road adequately. And then my lieutenant does the same thing. He worked the other day, came in on the weekend and put some hours in to help reduce some overtime and increase coverage. So we do what we can, but I know when I come in at night for 4 or 5 hours, I'm not very not very useful in the day.
Could you also clarify that for the committee, how difficult it is to cover a county of this size with only 2 deputies and what that means for service calls if you were to reduce to less than 2 deputies?
Yeah, it's, you know, we're at the mercy of how frequently calls come in and how far apart they are. So if you have a call in Viola and you have a call in Lone Rock and you have 2 cars on, you have and not, you know, that's a viable situation. You then have your cars on a good day, a half hour apart, 40 minutes apart, and nobody else to cover calls, hoping to rely on maybe the city police department to come out into the county and do something for us, or an outside agency, Sauk County, you know, Grant County, Iowa County, coming in and help covering calls until we can free somebody up to get there.
Not to mention the fact of no backup.
Yeah, and that's just it. I mean, if we have in that situation, you know, we have a deputy that calls for help and his closest backups in Lone Rock or Casanova or even Richland Center. It's not a fast drive to get from Richland Center to Viola. And that's kind of going to be my big example is because there's no real great roads to Viola. Everything takes time to get there. You know, that you're looking, if they're calling for help and they need help right now, you're hoping that an outside county can get to them in time or that you can get a deputy to them in time.
So just to clarify, your 0.7% budget increase does include cutting the casual temp position
Yes.
from both budgets.
Yep.
So you are
And
cutting a position
yeah.
from both scenarios.
And thank you for reminding me that I did for both scenarios. There is a casual position being cut. We're not currently utilizing it. We've been funding it, but we haven't used it for over a year now. And it's with things as they are right now with COVID, and the ability to remotely work, our secretary typist has been able to keep up with the workload, and we haven't really had a need to hire that position.
Yeah, Supervisor
Just to
Turk.
clarify, that casual position is a clerical position you're talking.
Yes,
Correct.
yep. So yeah, that was our part-time casual typist position.
Just to follow up on that casual position mainly enters information from a traffic stop, perhaps?
So their bulk of their workload was typing reports, entering data into Spillman from various cases, and I don't think they ever did much data entry for citations and stuff like that, but mostly just you know, reports and property information from reports and stuff like that.
How many staff does the sheriff's department have overall? I always hear that the two deputies covering the whole county, but you know, in order to staff the whole county 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, how many deputies do you have? And then similarly for the jail, how many jailers?
So we have 14 jailer dispatchers, and I'll say that's an important distinction because the jail inspector allows us to call our dispatcher a jailer, even though they can't get up from their seat and leave. They're, you know, they have to be at that chair, or somebody has to be at that chair at all times. The jail inspector kind of lets us fudge that a little bit and call them a jailer. So we have 14 jailer dispatchers. That includes the 2 sergeants in there. And they function, I mean, just as a jailer dispatcher, just with some additional responsibility. The patrol, we currently have 13. And that includes our inspector or our investigator. So his primary role is not patrol, although we have been using him here and there for patrol to help reduce overtime and cover shifts. And then three sergeants are counted in patrol. So yeah, and then
Wait,
myself.
3 are part of the 13.
The sergeants are part of 13, yes. Yep. And then the sheriff, the chief deputy, and lieutenant.
So under the 0% levy,
So
under the 0% levy increase, you would be going from how many to how many in the jail and how many?
14 to
on
13
patrol?
and 13 to 12.
Okay.
Yeah.
In order to accomplish that, would you have to let someone go or leave a position that's vacant unfilled?
I guess one of 2 ways. You know, currently we don't have any open positions at the sheriff's department. Well, with the exception of the chief deputy position. And my intent would be to hire somebody to fill those positions. When the jail, likely at this point, looks like we'd have to let somebody go.
So the patrol, you would not have to let somebody
I
go
would
if
say-
you didn't hire a chief deputy and.
There's a good chance we'd have to let somebody go on patrol, but there is a possibility that we would have an opening in the jail. Likely, we would have to let somebody go.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, Mr. C.
I'd just like to add one comment. The sheriff's department is an area, especially among jailers and staffers, but patrolmen as well. If you're short of staff on a continuous basis, it has a very serious impact on morale because it causes, sometimes there are some very stressful situations, and if you're short of people, you're going to have problems. And public safety is a priority in our county, and I think we need to be careful not to impinge upon it. Thank you.
So I just want to correct myself. The 13 did not include the investigator, but we have been using him in a patrol function.
And I'm assuming too, if you were truly to get to a 0% increase, you would really have to cut an additional position to compensate for the additional overtime costs. Cause I see in your summary sheet under 5, you're thinking roughly 100,000 or possibly more.
Yes.
And that's another position.
Yeah.
So really to stay at 0%, you would really need to cut 3 positions at the sheriff's department.
Potentially, and that,
Okay.
yeah, position is probably about 85,000, so.
Just roughly speaking,
Yeah,
I'm just
roughly
trying to,
speaking, yeah.
okay.
Yep.
Yeah, Supervisor
Just
Gentis,
wanna
yeah.
clarify. So you have
And
14.
could you speak
jail
up, please?
dispatchers, and you might go down to 13.
Could you speak up, please?
You have
Thank you.
14 jailers, so you might go down to 13, and you have 13 patrol, sheriff, chief deputy, lieutenant, and investigators, that's 17.
Yes.
Okay, just on it.
Yep. So we have
Go down one of those.
And you know, I just to further clarify, the the sheriff, chief deputy, and lieutenant don't really serve a primary function in patrol. That's more, the workings of the office and stuff like that. So, although we have been utilizing both the chief deputy and the lieutenant recently to help cover in a patrol function.
And an emergency or all that for that.
Yeah,
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to remind everyone too that we just increased the staff in the jail because of the inspection concerns we've gotten from the inspector concerns we've gotten. So in my mind, it seems like we're asking for trouble if we now then get rid of that position 6 months after we created that position, like we're flipping our nose at the inspector. So I just want to add that in there, that the reason we added that position was because of the inspector's great concerns with our staffing.
Mr. Chairman, could you repeat Miss Luck's comment? I did not hear it.
I'm on that as well.
Yeah, I think she's saying we just added a jailer dispatcher 6 months ago. And if we were to reduce one of the jailer dispatchers now, that would look bad to the inspector, the jail inspector, who was the reason why we added that position. at their
Absolutely.
recommendation.
I absolutely agree.
May I add to that, Mr. Chair? Adding a jailer is a lot more cost effective than building a new jail at this time. And
Right.
that's down the road. But right now, those people are doing a masterful job of keeping that thing running, so I would not want to see us reduce in that area.
And I guess to further elaborate on that, because Melissa is correct, the jail inspector urged us into adding that position. What he was looking for was a 3-person coverage as close to 24 hours a day as we could get. And that's where we added that. And we've almost got that. We got that most of the time on a perfect schedule when everybody comes to work. We manage that. And when you run into problems with people, if they're sick or injured or whatever, then we're struggling again to maintain those numbers.
And Mr. Chair, we do not have a duplicate dispatcher 911 call center. So this is all combined. It's a twofer.
Yeah.
And that's another consideration. The other consideration is Richland County is unique in that it only has one large city. We do have surrounding villages and towns. Some of them these are not full-time departments in those other towns. When he talks about Viola needs help, well, I think there's an officer on duty in Viola, but is it 24 hours?
No.
No. And none of them have 24-hour coverage. So our sheriff's department is the main law enforcement body in the county. Yes, it helps to have the city of Richland Center with a full-time police department, but once you get beyond that, it's slim and sometimes none. So just keep that into consideration here.
How many administrative staff?
Mr. Supervisor Gentis just asked how many administrative staff the sheriff's department has.
Thank you.
We have, as far as support staff, we have Amber and Sue. So Amber is the office manager. And then Sue, who is she's full-time, and she's kind of our front window person, and she does most of probably 97% of our report typing.
How does the grant application that the county board approved for a new, I think it was a new patrol person, how does that fit into the 2022 budget should we get that?
So, and I'm not sure the status on that particular grant. The short answer is that's not funded for in this budget.
Did that require, I seem to remember it was like the first year they totally pay for it, and then by year 5, we're totally paying for it. It was something like
I
that,
think
so.
the first year, the grant covered 75% of wages and benefits. So we would be on the hook for 25% the first year, and then it increased every year from there out.
And when do we find out if we're eligible to accept that grant?
I would imagine we probably would be finding out soon. I think we had found out by like August or September last year. And I believe, so the person who wrote that grant, Deputy Jurgensen, no longer works for us. But I do believe he said as he was leaving that he was putting the response information to come to my email. And I have not seen anything yet.
So you said by the end of September, you're thinking
I'm
that,
hoping we know by then, yeah.
okay.
Mr. Chair, are you referring to the generally annual traffic enforcement grant? It's a short-term sort of thing?
Oh, there was a grant, I believe it was from the US Department of Justice,
Cops hiring grant.
cops hiring grant, and we approved applying for the funds, but not accepting them, the county board. So I was just asking, how's that gonna affect?
Thank you.
So essentially, we wouldn't be able to accept it because you have not budgeted the 25%.
I guess in option 2, with the 5% levy increase, we could possibly swing it in that and then reduce the wages to offset what we would be getting through the grant.
I'm just wondering if it'd be possible to figure out what that 25% number is so that we can keep track of that
Yeah.
as we're considering approving the budget, because otherwise it's gonna be an unplanned expense, and I think we need,
It
we
would
got
be
this, I think it needs
I
to
mean,
go on this thing. is what I-
roughly $22,000. That's just,
The
Coming with
context,
it on the
context of the grant though is probably you can't reduce and then use this for an existing position. It
you
has to be
can, use it to fill existing vacancies.
Existing vacancies, okay, of
Yeah.
a position that is not filled.
So my understanding of the grant, it would be a viable option for that.
And you do expect to have vacancies yet this year.
Yes.
But can it be used to reduce?
Well, we're not reducing
plate.
staff if we're filling a vacancy we have.
Okay.
Vacant
So-
position.
Yeah, if we have a vacant position and we use it to fill the vacant position, we're just maintaining, and then if we can use it to maintain numbers as long as we have a vacancy. But I guess that would be another note too, we do have a vacancy currently, regardless. By ordinance, we have an unfilled position, we've had an unfilled position since 2009. So I feel like I should throw that out there because our call volume has increased. Taking 2020 out of the factor, which is kind of anomaly because of COVID, if you compare 2009 to 2019, our call volumes increased 20%. So things have not gotten any slower for us. We've just been doing more with less since 2009.
You've had an opening since 2009 that we have filled.
We've
And now
tried to
we're
fill
gonna-
it
now
several
we're
times.
Saying we're gonna cut another position.
Yeah.
My other question would be, are we required to have a jail?
Yes.
Yes.
They said.
So every county has their own, has a
Yeah.
jail.
Well, we're required to have, or a contract with the jail. I mean. do
I
we
think
have
we're,
to-
like, the sheriff is required to maintain custody of his inmates.
Okay.
So I don't know that just a contract would cover
Because
that.
surrounding counties have set up facilities and they want a contract.
In order to
get
generate revenue.
as many inmates as they can, so.
Yep.
If we reduce, just set our jail was, this is where we keep the drunks overnight or something, and
Yeah.
where we send them off to Viroqua.
Mhm.
That might be a possibility, but not an inexpensive possibility.
No, it's.
No, but is the cost, so my question would be is, okay, so Grant County, it does that. And
Yeah.
I know we've probably used Grant County in some fashion soon,
Yeah.
at some time. So the question is, do we do like you just said, Marty? This is a holding, okay, we're gonna deal with the very low key, whatever it may be. But our long-term residents in the jail, let's say, are in Grant County or in Viroqua. Is that an opportunity to meet the needs we have, yet maybe the staffing and stuff like that to reduce the overhead cost?
I'm probably gonna say-
Yes,
Mr.
Angela, go
I was
ahead.
just
Yeah.
gonna say, the problem with that is we still have to maintain a dispatch, and so our staffing would not drop by much. Am I correct? We would-
Yeah, and it wouldn't drop by much, and in addition to that is, there's certain court hearings where, Zoom has taken the way we do business, over. But there's certain court proceedings that the Zoom is never gonna cut it for it. Their person is going to have to be brought in person before a judge. And so, while we may reduce, staffing in the jail by not housing them in our jail, we're also gonna have to increase staffing, because we're gonna have to find a consistent way to get these people to and from Lancaster or Viroqua, and get them back and forth to before our court. And so you're gonna kind of pluck staffing from one place and have to plug them into a different place. Is the way I would foresee that.
Well, the only thing though is that's not a full-time position, so you're not full-time taking someone to the courthouse, I would guess. The other part of that is if you're talking about building a new jail 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, now that's a substantial amount of money you're talking about there, so I'm looking at it as a much bigger, broader thing. I'm not saying that this is gonna save their, it's not gonna fix their problem, but we need to look at it as, okay, what can we do going forward? Because you're not talking about $100,000 on a new jail. You're talking
Really.
millions.
I'm just gonna add to that topic exactly of starting to look at our options and discuss contracting versus building is on my list of things to tackle at LHAC in coming months, after we get through this process.
And the other side of it too is we have agreements worked out with Richland Hospital and Richland Hospital Clinic to get better rates for medical for our inmates. So if we have an extended hospital stay or something like that, we're not paying through the roof on it, where we may not have those agreements in Viroqua or Lancaster or so. And that can an extended stay of an inmate at a hospital can really throw a wrench into our budget in a hurry.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to be polite when I say this, but this whole conversation here back and forth between Mr. Cooey and Ms. Luck and our sheriff is not very audible. And there is, and I hate to say this because it sounds pedantic, there is provision in this in the statutes that all comments and statements in a public meeting must be audible to everyone in the room. And the room in this case is out there in the public because we're connected electronically. And I'm not trying to reprimand anybody, but I'm trying to say that if I can't hear, there are perhaps 25 other people that can't hear. I'm not complaining, but somebody could.
Okay, I'm gonna try to do a better job of getting people to speak up a little louder. It is kind of challenging because,
So it's harder, Don.
yeah, people are trying their best and you can just.
I know that Mr. Cooey carries a big stick, but he speaks rather softly.
I'll make sure Mr. Cooey speaks louder. I'll keep reminding him.
Thanks, Don.
You're welcome.
I also moved the speaker closer to him, so now he has to talk more. Okay, anyone else?
So what's the bottom line here?
So the bottom line, I think, yeah, that would be helpful if we could just get a summary of the dollar amounts that are gonna hit the
Item 7.
tax
I'm
levy.
still thinking.
The bottom line from what I'm tracking right now is we currently have an overture of $22,934. I'll be working with the sheriff's office, probably to piecemeal out the individual items to consider for either add back ends to the recommended gap increase to 5%, and then also working with the items like the COPS hiring grant, put that in as either an option of a future vacancy to try to plug that in, or fill in a currently unfunded vacancy that's been in place since 2019. If I summarized that correctly, Sheriff?
Yeah, and I guess just kind of to add, like, I look as option one is, like I said, that was my attempt to follow budget guidance, but it's not a viable option for the sheriff's department. Something in and around this 5% levy increase, not saying that 5%, we can't make maybe some tweaks or work something out with possible grant funding, is the final number, but that's, you know, I can't swallow reducing by one full-time patrol and one full-time jail. I mean, we're gonna be looking at reduction in services, less time for business checks at night, less time for property checks, increased response times to calls for service, less time for proactive policing. We're gonna have less time for the drug program, you know, for drug task force. We're gonna have less time for drug enforcement. We're gonna have less time for OWI enforcement. I mean, all things that are gonna impact the public significantly. And I don't see these as viable options, you know, those cuts as viable options. I threw them in there to follow budget guidance, but they don't work.
The only other thing I'd add to it is I think we've got to get the overtime figured in too, because otherwise I don't think it's realistic. And I remember hearing this from Sheriff Bindle quite a bit. Oh, but then there will be more overtime, but there was never a dollar figure put on that.
Yeah.
And I think as much as possible, we need to know the dollar figure so that the budget is realistic. You know, whatever the overtime is, under whatever scenario, I think we need to know it. Supervisor, what?
I was just gonna ask, is there any potential for additional revenue sources for the sheriff's department?
I mean, what revenue we get through citations, that comes back to us as jail assessment fund. Another side note on that doesn't really affect the sheriff's department, but revenue generated from our citations also goes to public schools. So less time for citations is less funding for schools. It's less funding for our jail assessment fund. Those aren't big numbers, but they do add up. And they are important. So alternate revenue sources, I mean, we could try and look at expanding our EMP, but you know, we're kind of at the electronic monitoring program, sorry, if just to clarify that. But we could try and expand that could increase revenue, but we're at the mercy of what we have for sentenced people to work with. And frankly, not everybody is a good candidate to be let out on the bracelet.
Okay, so if we can keep it real quick, because I don't want to push too much into our family courts commissioner. So Supervisor Cooey and Supervisor Turk, and then we'll be done.
My only question is what would it take to operate the whole, the way you're supposed to operate? So how much money was it gonna take? You know, you talk 5%, but how much money was it gonna take? Because their raises and their benefit package is already negotiated, correct?
For patrol, yes, it is, but not for.
So how much money does that cost? How much money are you trying to get rid of? You know what I mean? How much are you?
How much did raises and insurance increase
Yes.
our budget? $256,000. $220,000.
So 220,000 is what you would be over budget.
Yeah,
If you went, that's the number I was looking for.
Okay, Supervisor Turk.
And I was just gonna say, that's a great illustration of what impact years of lean budgeting have had, and if we're trying to make further cuts, I think Sheriff Porter presenting the two different versions of your proposal shows us the real impact of, okay, I can try to get towards 0%, but this is what you're gonna see happen. It's not just a thought that's out there, here is what it's gonna look like, and I appreciate us being given that.
Okay, thank you for taking the time. I'm gonna cut it off real quick so we can get to our next person, but thank you very much, Sheriff.
yeah, thank you.
And Mr. Seep, hopefully we were doing a better job there toward the end.
It's been quite arresting.
Welcome. So we have the next 15 minutes allotted to hear about the budget for the family court commissioners. And feel free to present first, and then we can ask questions. And could you please introduce yourself too? And then we have a speaker here, and we have several people online. You probably heard the whole discussion about speaking loud, so thank you.
I'm Deborah Schwartz. I'm the Richland County Family Court Commissioner. I've been Family Court Commissioner for 24 years. The Family Court Commissioner is appointed by the judge in the county and then approved by the chief district judge. I have not appeared before the committee for 4 or 5 years because they haven't requested that I appear before the committee because my budget never changes. I've had very few increases since I was appointed as Family Court Commissioner. My expenses are virtually the same as when I took over in 1997, with maybe a couple $100 increase. But I wanted to let you know who I am and what I do, because sometime maybe the expenses will increase in the future. My duties are to hear initial hearings in divorce actions. When a divorce is filed, there's a 120-day waiting period before you can go in to receive your final divorce judgment. And during that period of time, often families have issues concerning custody, physical placement, child support, payment of debts, maintenance, temporary property division, that they can't resolve between them. So I make the initial decisions in those hearings. All the decisions that I make are appealable to Judge Sharp if the parties wish to appeal it. That doesn't happen too often. I also do stipulated divorce hearings where everything is an agreement between the parties. So I would review the file, look at the financial disclosures, make sure that there's full disclosure there between the parties. And then I would review the marital settlement agreements to make sure that they were complete. And then they could be scheduled before me for hearing or to Judge Sharp for hearing. To be able to conduct these services, I have to acquire judicial credits each year, 10 judicial credits. There's 2 Family Court Commissioner conferences that I normally would attend each year, a 2-day conference in the spring and a 2-day conference in the fall. Because there isn't any specific educational companies that train Family Court Commissioners, the Family Court Commissioners decided to take on that duty themselves. So they charge $200 a year to put on the 4-day conferences. And that includes 3 meals at each conference. That's the best way for us to get educated, because all the Family Court Commissioners in the entire state come together and we receive the judicial education. Last year, I didn't use any of those funds because everything was online because of COVID. So I didn't use the mileage or the hotels. This year, they canceled the spring conference, but they scheduled the fall conference for a 3-day conference because they missed 2 days in the spring. It's unclear whether that's going to happen or whether they'll try to do it online. If I don't go, I don't use the money or shift it to any place in my budget. I'm also an attorney in private practice. So over the years, a lot of the expenses I've absorbed myself through my own practice. My salary hasn't increased much over the time, but so I'm just saying that at some point I may request an increase in salary. I don't have any health insurance paid through my position. It originally was included when I started, but it was dropped 4 or 5 years into me being Family Court Commissioner because of some issues with the insurance company that they changed to wasn't allowed to cover part-time employees, something like that. That's basically what I do, and my budget is similar to years in the past, but I wanted to meet you in person so I could tell you what I do and where the money goes.
And would you all be able to tell us what that impact on property tax levy is?
Minus $20.
So the revenues that you bring in cover your salary, it sounds like? Is that-
Well,
You're talking about the changes from the 2 years, or?
No, I was talking about the total.
Oh, the total impact, sorry,
Yeah.
$29,533.19, which is $20 down from the previous.
Okay, sorry about the question. So it's a 29,000, and it's no different from last year roughly. So, okay. All right. Questions from the committee?
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
I didn't
Sorry you
know
haven't been
you had
invited in a while.
Sounds like we're getting a bargain.
It's a real bargain.
So I'm happy to answer any questions, but I knew what my time would be. I wouldn't need much time, so you can use it in debating other issues on the table.
There's plenty to do,
Okay.
to debate. Okay, well, thank you for
Thank
coming
you.
again.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, I think
Yeah.
since we've got the property lister here, we can go ahead and
I know I
move
have
to that one.
5 years of this evidence.
And we'll have a bit of a recess opportunity unless you have a lot of things for us to debate. Okay, so, let's see, you can go ahead and present,
Okay.
and then we'll ask you questions, and can you just please introduce yourself?
Sure.
For folks
Sure.
online?
Talk loud.
Okay.
Yes.
I am Joellen Road. I'm the Richland County property lister. As far as the budget summary goes for 2022, my initial request.
Mr. Chairman, I can't hear.
That speaker is where you should be pointing
That speaker.
while you're talking. Yeah, and we'll move it a little closer to you. All right, go ahead.
All right. Again, I am Joellen Roach. I'm the Richland County property lister. My 2022 budget summary basically just explains the options that I have as far as keeping my budget at or under the 2021 numbers. Really, the only way for me to do this is to cut my hours from 40 hours a week to 35 hours a week. The downside with that is my workload is at or increasing right now because of the real estate market. And at fewer hours per week, it's going to be harder to get the workload accomplished. Also, one change in the numbers from what I submitted, we did just get updates from our software company, which will result in an increase for me of $676 from what they had previously been charging.
676.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so this one's easy to read on the budget summary. This would be on page 2 of that document under row 23. It looks like your budget for 2021 was 85 grand, and in 2022 it'd be 83 grand, and those were expenses, so I'm not sure how that works out with revenues. So maybe I shouldn't have been reading that. You all have a summary of the impact to the property tax levy?
Over levy for 2021 was 84,986. The projected levy for 2022 is 83,013.24.
Okay, so I was reading the right
So
numbers.
that doesn't include the $600 that you just mentioned.
Exactly.
So
Doesn't include that increase.
So it looks like your request has gone down about $1,000 if you include that extra money you just found out about.
Correct.
But just to clarify, but that's, you had 35 hours
That's
instead of 40.
exactly, that's at 35 versus at 40.
Can you expound on so if you were to go down to 35 hours going into next year, can you talk on different projects that are out there, complications that it may have with your relationship with the tax process?
Sure.
Thank you.
Basically, by cutting my hours to 35, that's less time that I'm in the office and able to do, first of all, the daily processing of transfer returns. So that's any property transfer that goes from one owner to another or is split between owners, gives me less time to do that. Also, one of the major responsibilities of my position is to prepare the property tax bills each year. That process starts at November, like the end of November, right around Thanksgiving. I get the information from all of our 22 municipalities, crunch those numbers, input it into our system, print and distribute tax bills for all 22 municipalities. So it's a very labor-intensive process. I work a lot of extra hours during that time. And if we cut my hours back to 35, that's going to be less time that I'm in the office and available to do that process, which may mean a delay in the municipalities getting their tax bills each year.
How much would it cost to, how much over would you be to go to 40 hours a week?
The question, Mr. Seep, was how much over would you be to go to 40 hours a week?
Thank you for repeating that.
That's I think you had it on here for the cost impact, $6,306.80. Am I tracking that correctly?
Correct. I've got a total, and again, this was before my increase for the software, 89,000. Yeah, 89,268.04.
So the figure for the extra cost, that'd be under number 7 on her budget summary. That's what he has that.
Plus 600.
Plus the
Plus the
6,
676,
Yeah.
correct,
So essentially 7,000.
right.
7,000 over. If it sounds like you have a parrot, that's because I'm repeating what you're saying.
Fine.
Okay, any other questions for Ms. Rowe? All right. Oh, yeah, Mr. Cooey.
Just one, so everybody understands this. So the property taxes, how much money do we take into the county for property tax?
12 million or so?
12 million? And then if she doesn't have time to do that work, that's pretty serious, amount of money, I would say, isn't it?
Outside of property taxes, when we're doing land transactions, and elected officials in the room here would have to help me make sure I get this right, but in order for us to file like quick claim deeds and things of that nature, when we're doing our transactions from properties we take for tax deeds, it gets initiated through Clerk Kalish's office. He's got to do some of the paperwork. That gets passed off to Julie's got some involvement. It gets passed to Sue to record it. Then it still has to come back around to Joe.
Exactly. Once a document is recorded at the Register of Deeds office, 3 times a month, Sue Triggs's office gives me those transfer returns. I take those transfer returns and then process them so they are up to date on our computer system.
Did you hear that, Don?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
She's right.
It's just gotta be closer.
Closer. Yeah, I don't have a great voice either, so.
Yeah.
Don, what I was saying is that what happens is 3 times every month, a recorded document at the Register of Deeds office, those documents or transfer returns come to me. I process those transfer returns and then update our system. And so that will give us the most current and accurate information for when those tax bills are processed at the end of the year.
Thank you very much for repeating that.
You're welcome.
Okay, anyone else? Yeah, Treasurer Keller, you just have to come up very close here so that, no, you actually have to come up to this chair right next to her and then speak into this microphone, or we don't want to get chastised by Mr. Seep. He's a very good advocate to making sure people online can hear. So just
Okay.
make sure to speak into that speaker and don't look at anyone else.
I'm the Audiology Inspector.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask Joanne to explain also throughout the year, the big job she has servicing all of the assessors and the municipalities. Without her work, they cannot have their open book and board of review. And without a board of review, you don't get your values, and the state depends on that, the municipalities depend on that, and I'll let you go into detail if you'd like.
The process with my job basically starts at the beginning of the year when I issue what's called the assessment or work roll to all 22 municipalities. From there, the assessors take that work roll, do what they do, and schedule what's called an open book and board of review with each municipality. I'd have to balance with the assessor's numbers. And after board of review, if there's any changes, the assessor lets me know about that. I update our records. I balance again with the assessor. As long as we balance, I submit the statement of assessment to the Department of Revenue, so they have our numbers. I also work with the DNR and the Department of Revenue on both MFL properties and commercial or manufacturing properties. After those numbers are updated, we also balance again. And then After those numbers come in, that's what we submit at tax time, for the property tax bills to be calculated.
Okay, anyone else? All right, well, thank you so much for taking the time to come in today. With that, I wonder if the committee would be interested in taking, say, a 20-minute recess till 11:20. We don't have our next appointment until 11:30, which is Pine Valley. Oh,
Yeah.
No?
It's not until like late this afternoon.
let's ask her.
Why not?
Julie, would you like to do yours now? Are you prepared?
Why not?
I guess.
Are you sure?
You don't have to drop my folder.
Yeah, if you're okay with going, that would be great, because we're ahead of schedule. Okay. So we've got Julie Keller, the treasurer here, and what did we allot? We allotted 15 minutes for you, so if you want to go ahead, that'd be great. Your very last budget presentation of your career.
Sad.
Wait,
Part isn't long, but. Okay, well, I submitted two budgets. One that would comply with the request of no increase, and I did the same thing as the property lister, that, in order to comply, the only thing I really could take out would be, to lower my deputies' wages, or hours, I should say, to 35 hours. We finally got to go to 40 hours in 2020. So, and we're finally keeping up with the workload like we should be. So, I really do not want to remove that, but that's the only thing left in my budget. And then I had a few other lines here I took out. Maybe I'm not prepared.
That's okay, take your time. We're not in a huge rush since we're ahead of schedule.
Okay, so I reduced the office supplies $100. Postage and envelopes by 100 as well, although we all know postage goes up all the time. So I didn't really want to do that, and then reduce advertising by 200. And the only thing about that, most of the advertising is by state statute that I am required to advertise. Sometimes it's not as expensive as others, but I don't have any control over that. I reduced the mileage $65.78 so that I could come in at the same amount as last year. But I really hope that you will allow the deputy treasurer to remain at 40 hours and, put back the small amounts that I did take out. I guess especially to put the hours back.
Yeah, Supervisor Luck, go ahead.
So Treasurer Keller's, with the new treasurer coming in and learning the ropes, how important is it, do you think, even more so important to have the deputy at 40 hours, given that they're going to be the one with a lot of the knowledge?
That's correct, yes. I think it's very important. Because he's going to need a lot of help. And it'll all go fine, but it's going to be a learning curve, and every day is a new story. So there's a lot to learn. Just like probably every office, but.
And just to clarify, so the amount you need to restore to your, what you need is $6,339.37.
That's correct. Yes.
I don't know if this has directly to do with the treasurer's budget, but I noticed when I was going through the county budget summary under revenues on, I don't know what page it was. It was further down in the 13-page document under sale of tax deeds. I guess when I think of sale of tax deeds, I think of the treasurer's office, because every time we sell a tax deed, it's the treasurer that comes forward to present that. And I've never seen that worked into the budget as a projection. And I know that changes, we can't always predict what properties we're gonna sell, but we have In 2020, we got $102,000 in revenue from the sale of tax deeds. And this year, through June 30th, we got 51,000. But we don't have anything projected for 2022. And I guess I'm wondering if that could be part of how to manage the treasurer's budget as well. Does the treasurer's office have expenses? Does your office pay for the notice, or is that the clerk's office that pays for the notice for the sale?
It comes out of the
There's
tax
a-
deed fund.
Yes, there's a Fund 10 tax deed expense line for that.
Okay.
And the title reports come out of that,
Right.
everything comes out of that, the advertising.
Okay, so it's pretty much separate from both of your
It is.
departments, and all the revenues going to the general fund.
Yes, correct.
For that. Okay, well, and maybe that's a separate topic, I guess, but I think that's potentially one way to plug some of our budget holes to project some of that revenue.
Yeah, historically, they just, for whatever reason, it hasn't been projected, and I don't know why it hasn't been or what the story is, but I guess.
If that's 100,000 and we were already short 500 grand or
Right.
whatever it was, that would be a way to fill some of it. So I just think of you when I think of tax deed sales, so that's why I brought that up. Any other questions or comments for the treasurer?
So in the, dealing with our $6,339 is what we need to all done.
Supervisor Gentis is just confirming for folks online, we're looking for $6,339 for the treasurer's office
Oh, yeah.
to maintain their salary and health insurance increases and the current staff levels. Okay, anyone else?
I have a question. If you have two additional people on your staff, it's you plus two people.
It's me and the deputy, and then the property lister is kind of an independent. We always compared that position to register and probate as kind of a independent office. She has her own budget, and it's been that way since I started.
So when you say restore staff, you're only talking about one person, 5 hours, basically. Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Okay, anyone else? All right, well, now you don't have to make 2 trips across the street. So, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure working with you for 8 years in my case.
Thank you very much. It's just been a real pleasure for myself too, and it's been a privilege to be elected officials. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll miss you. Okay, so now, let's see, that cut out our 2:45. So now we have an afternoon break built in, if we stay on schedule.
We don't have a lunch break though, right? We're gonna eat more.
We're gonna eat during the UW Extension office presentation if the food comes right at noon. Is that what you're?
Food's gonna arrive here about noon. There's tables set out outside, so it's kind of, as time permits, if you wanna grab something or bring it back and kind of munch away, it might be a little less than the professional